Moore, and I am doing a series. This is a series of episodes covering the sexual ethics policy for the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. And this policy was updated in 2024. And this is going to be a continuation of the guidelines for preventing and reporting sexual harassment on page 5, and I'm continuing on page 6. And basically what I am doing is giving examples showing the hypocrisy of this policy that the Texas Annual Conference Administration of the United Methodist Denomination has in effect. So this is the guidelines for preventing and reporting sexual harassment. Sexual language or references, suggestive or insulting sounds, references of a sexual nature about any person. So my father did all of those throughout my childhood, into my teenage years, and adulthood. And here is the way abuse works, growing up in an abusive home. You are not being abused every second. And there are periods of time where you are not being abused. Does this mean you never grew up in an abusive home? Absolutely not. And there could be various reasons why things may be cooling off. You may be at a peaceful time where it's not as chaotic as it would be, where you're not, you're feeling more safer. You're going through a period of time where you're feeling more secure and safer about your surroundings. However, there's something inside you, having grown up in that, I can tell you that there is something inside you, if it's your, you can call it your intuition, where you know that can change at any moment. And I am going to step out of my comfort zone and share some of the things that my father would do or say to me. And if anybody should feel embarrassed or ashamed, it would be my father if he were alive, or it would be his family, or anyone that supported him. One of them is a common, and if you are easily triggered, please take care of yourself and either don't watch this. I have complex PTSD, so I do avoid things that trigger me. I am pretty calloused with this, and I'm not triggered very often. When I was young, I was a minor, I would say under the age of 18, probably not even 16 yet. There were things that he would do that I can't tell you how old I was when he started. Something he would say to me multiple times throughout my life. I can't look back and tell you when the first time was that he said that to me. And the reason is because of the grooming, because it was my normal. However, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't like it. I felt uncomfortable, and I couldn't tell you why. And there was nowhere to turn because no one was going to validate me. And I don't look, I did it one time. I don't look for validation now. I don't care. I'm going to tell you how it was, and I will tell you how it is now. I don't have a problem with that. And I'm going to tell you what I've done to help myself and to heal and to recover. And my opinions are my own opinions, and they may not be shared with some people. And I'm okay with that. Not everybody has to see eye to eye, and I am okay with someone disagreeing with me. They can have their opinion. I don't care. So, one of the common stories that my father would share with me, he would talk about how he and my mother, this was before I was born, they were in a group home. They were taking care of kids in a group home. They were boys. And this group home was on land where, within the same vicinity, the same land, that there was also cattle and calves. And my father told me this story many times. And he told me that these boys would go out in the field with the baby calves, and they would allow the baby calves to relieve them. I will let you use your imagination. I don't know what crack my father was smoking, honestly, but clearly the Texas Annual Conference administration did not have an issue with employing someone like my father with his lack of integrity and lack of character and a waste of space on this planet. But fortunately, he is no longer here. The next one would be gossip or speculation about a person's sexuality, sexual practices, sexual health, pregnancy, or virility. Request for dates. Remarks about anatomy. My father made remarks about my anatomy. He also he was inappropriate with touching. And the way the inappropriate behavior with him worked, he was so clever and he was so good at being a predator, because that was his best talent. I don't know if that's how he got employed at Texas Annual Conference, but I can tell you he was very good at getting away with being a sexual predator. And the way that he would operate, he could touch a person inappropriately, and they would not even realize what had happened. But that happens a lot with sexual abuse. You may not realize it at the time. Something may feel off. You can't quite figure out what it is. You could be a child, and you may realize in that moment you do not like the way you were being touched. You may have memories that you look back on when you were a child, and you don't know if you were being appropriately bathed in the bathtub or if you had been inappropriately touched. This is how abuse works. And anyone who's ever been abused and has done the work on healing and recovery and growth, they're going to understand exactly what I am talking about. And there is nothing wrong with me because of what I am saying. What I am saying is because of the work that I have done, which has enabled me to communicate what takes place in an abusive environment that is unsafe. Always trust your intuition. If something feels off, more than likely it is. But as a child, it is very hard to, your discernment is not developed when you are a child. Okay. Bragging about sexual conquest. Inquiries about sexual conduct. Terms of endearment. Okay. Shaming people because of their sexual preference as far as transgender or homosexuality. I could care less about that. And I don't think it's appropriate to shame someone because of that choice, especially if it is a consensual relationship between two adults. And I think that I know that in the Christian evangelical culture, it is also common for people within the church to preach and teach and talk about waiting until marriage, save yourself until marriage. And the problem with that is that what you're not teaching, what people who are children are not learning, because that's what is enforced in the home of the evangelicals. That's what is enforced, what was enforced in my home, is that a lot of times children are not learning how to protect themselves. They're not learning how to make healthy decisions, because if all you're taught is only wait until marriage, that's all you do, you wait until marriage. No sexual contact, you wait until marriage. So by the time, which if this rarely happens, by the time you wait until you're married, you're making an uninformed decision, because you are not understanding the health consequences that can be brought on, that anyone may have to deal with once they become sexually active. But this is a very fine line. It is a very delicate line. And it is a challenge. And it takes the right person with the right maturity to address these issues appropriately without crossing that line from appropriate to inappropriate. And also, when kids are going into puberty and they're beginning to have discover that they have sexual desires, what they're taught is that is wrong. instead of taught, okay, this is normal. And when they're taught and they're shamed for that, that's when it crosses the line into being abusive. Unless there is sexual abuse involved, it is a tricky topic with parents, and there are many parents that do not know how to approach this issue that everybody faces in life appropriately, because my parents obviously were dumbasses of epic proportions. Okay. Terms of endearment, use of curse words or vulgarity, visual and nonverbal, posters, photographs, cartoons or drawings, including those that depict nudity, sex acts, provocative poses, etc. Email messages or graphic sexting, inappropriate wallpaper, screensavers, or electronic displays of a sexual nature. Possession of pornography or inappropriate materials of a sexual nature on church or school property, or on church or school computers, or its display, duplication, or transmission. When my father was on disability in Crosby, well, my parents were living in Crosby, and my father was on disability through the Texas Annual Conference Administration. I began to realize that I had been sexually abused. And the reason why I didn't figure it out sooner, which I wish I had, but I just didn't, was because I had nothing to compare my childhood to. I was sheltered. My parents were very controlling on who I was friends with. However, I had unhealthy relationships with people that they clearly did not have a problem with. So that should say a lot. They were poor judges in character. And I was in my late 20s, and I was about to step into the shower. I had absolutely nothing on. And my father proceeded to open the door. And I'm about to step in the shower, and I have absolutely nothing on. And I made eye contact with him. Like, our eyes met. And I felt this small. I felt incredibly disgusting. Because I knew in that moment, by the look in his eye, he knew exactly what he was doing. He opened that door. He knew I was in there. And he opened that door because he wanted to see me with my clothes off. It was a very vulnerable moment for me, and he knew this. And later he came and put his arm around me and whispered to me and said, "Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I opened the door on you like that." And I knew he didn't mean a word of it. He knew exactly what he was doing. There was no remorse. And my mother did nothing. Now, my father was not pastoring a church at this time. However, my father, who was a former pastor, but on disability through the Texas Annual Conference, was attending Lake Houston United Methodist Church, which was under the Texas Conference Administration at that time. And these churches tend to give these clergy more freedom than what they should give them, even if they are not employed and placed on assignment at that church. Because my father, considering the fact that he's on, even though he was on disability through the Texas Annual Conference, even the things he was doing to me at that time, even in their home, which was non-consensual. I never invited him to open that door to the bathroom when I had nothing on and I was about to step in the shower. I never consented to that. That was non-consensual. Apparently, the Texas Annual Conference is a bit confused on what is consensual and what is non-consensual. That was also against the policy of the Texas Annual Conference because I was experiencing sexual harassment from my father, who was on disability, through the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist denomination in Houston. Okay, training. All clergy at whatever stage and all supervisors of employees and volunteers must complete the Texas Annual Conference Sexual Ethics course every 4 years and return the acknowledgement form for their personal file. That training is a load of shit because there are multiple clergy. I went to a clergy, Chap Temple, Ivy League scholar. I told him about my parents. I told him about my father sexually abusing me. I told him my parents didn't love me. He was condescending and said they did. Clearly, if he felt that my parents loved me, my mother who would drug me so that my father could sexually assault me, then maybe his idea of parental love is just as sick. Because he was out of line. And I met with him alone in his office. That was actually against the sexual ethics policy. There should have been someone else there. Another clergy who I went to during the time that the sexual ethics policy was in place, he was the highest paid clergy of the Texas Annual Conference. I told him about my father sexually abusing me. He didn't care. He wanted nothing to do with it. He had no interest in assisting me, helping me get on my feet and get out of that situation. I would try to work. My parents would figure out how to get money from me, and I could not get on my feet financially. And when I went to Chap Temple, I was married at the time and had an infant at the time. And I had told Chap Temple I was ready to go to Bishop Huey. I was ready to talk to the bishop about the fact that my father had a history of sexually abusing me. And Chap Temple's response to me was, there is nothing to discuss. So according to a clergy who is an Ivy League scholar that was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration, was even interviewed for possibly being elected as bishop, feels that sexual abuse from a parent who is an ordained clergy employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration is not relevant enough to discuss with a bishop of the Texas Annual Conference. When I told Bishop Huey this, her response to me, her reaction was, listen, Bishop Huey was a very petite woman, and she had a strong presence for someone that was very petite, highly educated, highly intelligent, but a strong presence that demanded respect, an authoritative presence. And she was so caught off guard by what I had to say that she had facepalm. And yet they offered me nothing. Employees and designated volunteers must receive a copy of the sexual ethics policy and return the acknowledgement form for their personnel file. It is alarming how many churches will have one person in the nursery to save money, which goes against this policy in the United Methodist denomination and under the Texas Annual Conference administration. Which means that whoever is in there with that child is at risk of being falsely accused. And then once they're falsely accused, they're shit out of luck. It's going to be anybody else's word against them. But when you have two people in there, or even audio and video surveillance, it prevents that from happening. But hindsight is not 20/20 for the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist denomination. And the reason why hindsight is not 20/20 for them is because they have had 3 clergy that have been indicted for crimes. Somehow my father was talented enough to get away with what he did, along with my mother. And clearly the Texas Annual Conference was okay with that. And 2 of those 3 pastors were sexual predators. And one of those clergy succeeded in murdering his wife in a United Methodist parsonage. And she is not here to tell her story today. And that was Marla Tabb. Remember her name, Marla Tabb. Because Marla Tabb was brutally beaten beyond recognition. And the Texas Annual Conference should be just as concerned what is going on in the home of the clergy as they are what is going on in the churches. Because more than likely, whatever is going on in the homes of the church members, whatever abuse or domestic violence is going on there, whatever is going on in the home of the clergy, abuse or domestic violence, eventually that is going to be brought in, and the general public is going to be affected, or even worse, someone's child is going to be affected. And let me tell you that the effects of sexual abuse from anybody is lifelong. The effects of that are lifelong. And the more severe, the more repetitive episodes by the same person or multiple people, the stronger the effects are on a person's life and mental health. Anyone report, this is about reporting, so listen closely. Anyone who believes he or she has been a victim of any form of sexual harassment should report it promptly to one or more of the following: a supervisor or anyone in the supervisory chain; 2, the head of the congregation or institution; 3, the chair of the pastor or SPRC. I'm not quite sure what that's an abbreviation for. 4, a district superintendent, pastoral committee, a district superintendent. And 5, the bishop's office. What a load of shit. Because let me tell you, I've reported multiple incidents. And I can tell you that nothing is done. Because the reason why Kendall Graham was able to get away with what he was able to get away with is because people know. And the same for my father. No one wants to address it. And here's what else I want to say. There was a bishop, and his name was Bishop Crutchfield. I have no issues with him. He passed away in 1984. He was gay. I have no judgment with that. In fact, I would have loved to have had a conversation with him, because Bishop Crutchfield was very passionate about the United Methodist denomination and about the Texas Annual Conference. And he was married to a woman, but he was gay. But it's not like he lived in a time and a culture where he could be openly gay. I don't think his wife was a victim. Not in that circumstance. I believe she knew. She had to have known. There's no way she could not have known. He was not a hypocrite, because clearly he was gay. I mean, it's not like he could live openly gay during that time period that he was bishop. I am sure that my cousin, Judge Morris Hassel, knew him. And I'm sure that he knew him well. And I know that there were many people that worked closely with him that had to have known that he was gay. And I know that I don't believe that his wife was a victim of that because she knew. That was a consensual relationship. A Methodist minister sexually abusing a child there should be a policy specifically named for that. And it should not be included in the sexual ethics policy. It is unethical. I wholeheartedly agree. However, it is not a consensual relationship. And a pastor sexually abusing a child or being inappropriate with a child is not the same as a pastor hooking up with a church member. It's not. It's not the same as a pastor having a consensual relationship with another adult who is a member of a church. It's not the same. It's much worse than that. And the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston should absolutely be ashamed of themselves. And they owe the victims far more than a group apology read to clergy who are the ones most likely to perpetrate the abuse. It's unacceptable. And that is all I have for tonight.